Having had to deal with the pain of Lyme disease for over 20 years myself, I sometimes find myself cringing at the thought of my own son having to suffer with this disease. Chris and Jessica Taliana live in Woodbridge, Ontario with their 4 children. Not only have they experienced Lyme with their 4-year-old son, but 8 years later they now find themselves with a 16-year-old daughter that is struggling with chronic Lyme disease.
My name's Taliana. I'm 16 years old and I live in Woodbridge and I have chronic Lyme disease. It's really hard to move out of bed. I was just in so much pain. I couldn't sleep, so I got really tired. My headache started to get really worse, and then the joint pain started and everything just followed afterwards.
Yeah, and she experienced swelling in her knees, her fingers. She has a little bit of general swelling all over. One of the things that started to happen too is she started missing school, and the gym teacher, because I phoned and asked, well, what do you think is going on? And one of the doctors we visited said she's depressed. So on top of fibromyalgia and all these other diagnoses, one of the doctors thought she was depressed and perhaps even suicidal. So I thought, let me call the teachers who see her every day. What do they feel is going on with her? And the teacher flat out said, no, she's not depressed. She just physically can't do it. So other kids, while they're running, she would lose her stamina. And I think that's really important. There's a difference between being lazy, and a lot of people with Lyme are often labeled as being lazy. They just physically can't do it. So the teacher would incorporate her and say, okay, she'd help her out of the field, but if she had to run for any lengths of time, she couldn't do it. She would be out of air and exhausted and very pale. And that's, the gym teacher said, no, she just physically can't do it. And she said, I know the difference between the kids who are just being lazy and fooling around. She said she's trying her best, and she didn't feel that she was depressed at that time. But when you're sick, it certainly can start to make you feel really sad and low and lose hope. But it was through speaking to the teachers and then just crossing everything off. Could it be this? Could it be that? And going to all the specialists that they recommended for us. And we kept saying, please, consider Lyme. Because we've traveled to Lyme endemic areas, and then we had a history of our son being exposed to it about 7-8 years ago. Could be 9. And we had a heck of a time getting treatment for him back then. The difference is with him, I saw the tick on him. He was 4 years old, I bathed him. She was 15, I don't bathe her. So I missed it. So if it was there, I didn't see it, and I didn't see the rash. And now I understand that not everyone's gonna get a rash, not everyone's gonna see the bug. And with my son, I saw it and it was somewhat engorged. And I tried to brush it off from his skin, but it was embedded, it wouldn't come out. But I knew enough to get the tweezers and remove it from the base and save it. But even with the tick in hand, I had a really hard time getting treatment for him. We went to 9 different doctors, pediatricians included, and there's just not enough awareness for our doctors, and there's not enough education on the possibility of Lyme being here. They don't seem to be aware of the difference between acute Lyme and chronic Lyme. And if you want to present that you may have been exposed, they want to just deny the possibility that it's even possible, and just to brush it off and let it go and forget about it. But your symptoms don't go away. They wax and wane, and you're getting worse, and they... Anyway, with my son, 2 months later, a doctor gave in and gave us antibiotics. With him, he broke out in spots all over. He did have a halo rash at the point where the bite was. They identified the tick, but they wouldn't test it to see what it was carrying. There's no doubt in my mind that he got sick from the tick, and he also got better from treatment, but I had to fight for it. And we shouldn't need to fight for and advocate so hard with these professionals. They're professionals. They're the ones who should be specializing in this. And it was really tough back then. And here we are 7, 8 years, 9 years later, and not a whole lot has changed. I had one doctor say, well, we'd only treat for Lyme disease if you come in with the bug on you. And it's kind of like saying you couldn't have been robbed if you don't catch the robber. But yet the symptoms are still there. So there needs to be a campaign for awareness for doctors, and also for the doctors who are willing to treat, protection for them. Some of the doctors are really afraid. They admit that they've known about Lyme, some of them even for 6 years. They've known about it, but they have seen what has happened to other doctors who've tried to help patients with the Lyme disease. Many of them have been forced into retirement. or shunned, or they close their doors, it's not worth it for them to risk their license or to put themselves on the line where they could lose their livelihood to help patients. So many of them want to help, but they're tied and they're not being able to help. One of the doctors who did mean well, and he was very open-minded to investigating, he said, "But Jess, it's called a deer tick because it lives on deer." And so it all goes back to awareness, and that's why it's good that they're renaming it the black-legged tick, because there's misconceptions. And just if we have an updated information, it will help the doctors to better easily serve their patients. Because I have to hope and believe that they have an ultimate goal of wanting to take care of their patients and helping them to become well. With York Region, I've contacted them, and they had, from over a year ago, they said that they're going to have a campaign to fight the bite, which would include West Nile, Lyme, and rabies. And the only thing I've seen are full-page ads on West Nile. And we know that Lyme is spreading faster than West Nile and AIDS put together. And then they said, well, we had a campaign up at Mill Pond and 300 people arrived. And so that's wonderful for the 300 people who attended that. But what about the
rest
30,000 people in Woodbridge? What about the rest of Vaughan?
What about the rest of York?
Yes.
The rest of Ontario?
The Taliani's insight having to deal with the healthcare system twice with regard to Lyme is simply off the chart. The general public simply shouldn't be treated this way. The saddest part is, even in 2011, any suggestion by our government that the Canadian healthcare system has finally stepped up and is dealing with Lyme disease in good faith is simply rhetoric. Until proper public awareness becomes a real priority, Canadians will continue to needlessly contract, suffer, and perish from this disease.